by the Dada movement, and particularly Marcel Duchamp. Very, very important artist. So we can talk about any ism in art. We can talk about modernism, postmodernism, we can talk about the abstract expressionist movement. It all goes back to the Dada movement. What he was doing in this work was challenging the gallery system, the museum system. With this work, he was challenging the norms, the conventions of the norm at the time. Who says it's art, who says it's not art? Because you put a piece of work in a museum or a gallery, does that make it art? And I think that is such a clever question because it's an important one. People think, oh, it's in a museum, it's got to be wonderful. You ever been to a museum, you look at the work on the wall, and you're like, wow, this is so good. And then you go to like, I don't know, like a fire hydrant or a switch on the wall, and you go, ooh, wait a minute, that's just a switch, right? Because it's in the gallery, you're still looking at all the work, they're just, it's all one thing. So anyway, so keep in mind that Surrealism was influenced by the Dada movement. Duchamp is very important. Also, you can go to the next one. Okay, I see it. I just have this up so you can look at it while I'm just going to go through the history, again, of the Surrealist movement, but these are some images of the women artists I'm going to talk about briefly. But Andre Breton, he was a writer for the Dada movement. So remember that he's the first one who wrote the manifesto for Surrealism. So there's a real connection there. But also, the Surrealists were very much influenced by Jericho. Please, pardon my pronunciation if I'm saying it wrong. But they were very much influenced by Jericho's work. Do you guys know Jericho's work? Yeah? The very mysterious shadows, very stark shadows, very fantasy-like. And remember Jericho was 1915, 1913, 1914, way before. So there's a lot of influence there. I wish we had some slides of Jericho's work so you could see it, but that's okay, I think we're good. So I want to talk about, so you get an idea where it's coming from, how it started. And then, there are three words that describe Surrealism. There's surreal, fantastical, and bizarre, right? Hard to understand, the bizarre, which we'll work with now. I want to talk to you too about what actually is Surrealism. I'm going to read out, this makes a lot of sense. Surrealism is an art and cultural movement that developed in Europe after World War I, in which artists aim to allow the unconscious mind to express itself, often resulting in the depiction of illogical or dreamlike scenes and ideas. Pretty much what we do in our work today. What is their way of thinking? Surrealists changed the paradigm of art history in many ways. Well, the Dada movement did that. Who says what art is? Who says what art is not? Is this a good piece of artwork? Is it not a good piece? Who says? Says who? So it's very important that they change. They make people think. Think about what it is you think is the conventional norm. They took that and they questioned that and they said, is there really a norm? What is the norm? Is there a normal? They took that and twisted it upside down. They basically took the art world as we knew it and turned it up on its head. And then now it's becoming it had become a big critique. Everything was pretty pictures, everything was realism, everything was, think back to the time, everything was structured and everything was in that ism of what you were told art is for years and years and years. We can go back and talk about the Impressionists, how they turned things upside down too, in a sense, in terms of materials, but not to get too far out there. So Surrealism is, in its essence, encourages thinking outside the box, which we all like to do. It dares us to question reality. It blurs the lines of what we think is the norm. I love that line. It blurs the line. It blurs what we see as the normal and the conventional. And that's pretty much how this world operates, right? I mean, artists, we pretty much are on the fringe. And to delve into the depth of the subconscious minds, it pushes boundaries and breaks down conventions. And I think that's really important. And I think that I always tell my students to make good, strong artwork, it's important to push the barriers, experiment. If you don't experiment, then how do you learn? And, it's like we were talking about, experiment. Don't ask me to show you how to use it. Go and play with it, experiment with it. Find out what you can do with it. Sometimes when you tell them this is what you got to do, that's all they can do. They don't think outside the box. So surrealism, I think, is a really strong message within that. Let me go back to, we can switch through other slides of the women artists when we get to in a minute.
That's it next.
Okay, all right, Dorothy Tanner. There are two main types of surrealist art when you look at it visually, okay? There's veristic, V-E-R-I-S-T-I-C. Veristic is artwork like Salvador Dali, René Magritte, where you see it is photographic, right? It's images that are done in a very photographic way, but in a very surreal, dreamlike context. Then there is automatism, or psychic automatism. And that's, I think, more interesting from my perspective. That is, you want to suppress your use of process. You don't want to be aware of the process. Do you know the artist Hans Arp?
Yes. Yes.
Beautiful work. Automatic writing, automatic mark making. It's just, spontaneity. Trying to let go of the conscious way of thinking. Let the process just be. Just do it. Do it by chance. So those are two different types. Visually, when you look at surrealism, those are two different types, styles. You want to suppress conscious control over the process. That's a good way of thinking about it. Surrealism was a community, stood for freedom. It was about more than works of art. And there are lots of women in the surrealist movement. I'm just going to name off a few that Alina and I put together for slides. Leonore Carrington, then we're going to go back and do a second. Dorothy Tanning, Frida Kahlo, I think her last Dora Maar, M-A-A-R, what's the pronunciation for that?
Yeah.
Maar, yeah. Mary Oppenheim, Claude Cahun, and Lee Miller. Those are just some that I put together based on time. These women, they're living in a man's world, right? We still are living in a man's world. We are... That's right. Regulate Dick, not Jane. That's it. So, these women, at the same time as these men are doing all this stuff, they took surrealism and they used it for their inner search. A lot of them used self-portraits. A lot of them worked with, they wanted to understand their own psyche. They wanted to delve into their own subconscious. And these women in the surrealist movement, they were feminists. Very first early feminists. And they often would use materials that were innate to them, that they could show that, hey, we are not the men. We are strong within our own group of people, within our own gender. We work with textiles. They work with fabric, fiber arts. So they work with performance art, photography, things that were not conducive so much to what we knew of men. Men painting, sculpture. So women, which I think is so important. I think women artists, Eva has to go on and on about her, but there are so many women artists that have pushed the boundaries And I think we owe a lot to women artists. There's so many of them. And because these surrealist female artists were very interested in going against the norm, going against what the men had this thing that women had this role. This was their gender. This is where they were supposed to be. So a lot of what they did in their work was really pushing that boundary, working against it. The female surrealists rebelled against gender-specific role, behavior, and often represented themselves with strikingly androgynous features or in unusual roles or disguises. French artist Claude Cahun is best known for her self-portraits assuring a variety of persona. They didn't want to be the little woman who sits in the kitchen and the husband, is, making the big sculptures and the paintings and very testosterone. They rebelled that, and they did it in a great way. And that's what we get some of these great artists. I saw a retrospect of Dorothy Tanning, her work. It was beautiful. It was amazing. Feminist artists often embraced alternative materials that were not connected to men, textiles, mixed media, performance art, video, which I had just spoken about. And I think now I can go into some of the female artists just briefly. And I want to get you guys to some questions I have for you guys when we get into the female artists. This is Dorothy Tanning. And this is, it's a really good piece. Yeah. So you can see the self-portraits, right? You can see what they're getting at. Is anybody familiar with this particular piece? This would be with the technique, the style, where you're dealing with the realism, right? This is the opposite to the automatic mark making or thinking or happening. Let's go. Yeah?
Hard material.
What else? That's true, yeah.
Also making something that you would use unusable.
Changes the context of the cup. Okay. What do you think the concept, the conceptual?
Heating an imaginary coffee. Making the coffee hot.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a fur. So the fur gives warm sensation.
Mm-hmm.
So warming the coffee.
The fur to me also repels though. The fur repels the liquid.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't absorb
Can you
it.
imagine drinking out of that?
But that's exactly. You're going to say something?
Well, the idea of warm from the idea of enveloping and comforting, maybe.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's the woman. That's the woman is supposed to be that.
Right.
But
Comforter.
right, the comforter. But here she's turning the cup into something that you can't drink. It's not usable. So she's turning it. The comfort is going out of the thing, out of the cup. I mean, it's not what the woman is supposed to be.
Yeah, maybe it's also about covering up the beautiful thing below, because, if you think about women, we have to shave, we have to, get rid of the hair that's on us naturally, things like that, and then underneath is supposed to be the beauty. And so where's the beauty in that cup right now? It's underneath all that hair.
Right.
You would have to transform it into something else to become this object that's expected by society.
That's really interesting because women are seen as objects and they have to look a certain way and they have to have a beauty. I think it's a beautiful object to look at. Lucy Lepard, who's familiar with Lucy Lepard? She did a lot, you know Lucy Lepard? Yeah. She did a lot of writing about Eva Hess and I can't think of the other person. But anyway, this is everything you're saying I totally agree with, and I think it's all about this. But somebody said, imagine drinking out of this cup, right? Mm-hmm. So it's also about gay sex, right? You know that part of it, right? Lucy Lepard wrote a beautiful thing, and it's because of the fur on the cup, your lips Your lips are always kissing cups, right? That's what we do with a cup or a glass or a wine glass. Some of us kiss our wine glass more than others, but... But this is about lesbian sex. Part of it. This is an interpretation by Lucy Lepard. It's like people make, that's what they do, they get paid for these writings, right? It's like some people wrote about Georgia O'Keeffe, saying her flowers were sexual, right? About the female anatomy. I think Georgia O'Keeffe said no, they were just close-ups of flowers. But anyway, I thought that was very interesting, and I think that you can see, look at the spoon.
That reminds me of my grandma's hairbrush.
Yeah?
The silver,
Yeah.
The silver hairbrush that always sat on the grandmother's dresser.
Or with all the little things at the end, with the round one?
Yeah, you know, because it was so, like on the back side, that those hairbrushes, those silver hairbrushes were like that fur, very soft. They're not like today's hairbrushes that are like just hard.
You know, I don't use a hairbrush, I have no idea. I just go like this. Yes, we are. Let's go to Claude Calhoun, the cross-dresser right before. Let me see. Did you get a Claude Calhoun in there?
No.
No?
Yes,
You did?
Which one? Go keep going. It's the men. Down.
No. So I was talking about earlier about surrealism and how women were really, really rebelling that role that men had given them, right? This is where you're supposed to be. This artist I thought was very interesting because she was pushing those boundaries by saying, no, we can be anybody, we can have any certain persona, this is not who we have to be. So this is what a lot of her portraits are about. A lot of her work is about cross-dressing, a lot of it is about that particular concept. I know how much time I've done now, right, pretty much? How much time do I have? 1 minute?
5 minutes.
Okay. So look at Frida Kahlo. That's what went on, you guys all know, so I'm one hit wonder, right? Frida Kahlo, right? Goes Frida Kahlo. So this one here, Frida Kahlo, I mean, everybody knows about Frida Kahlo, right? What do you know about this piece? What would you want to say about that? What about the color? What about the images around it?
What looks like this? Looks
Oh,
like she's
it's
inside
like,
out.
it's like fertility. It's like a womb.
It makes me think of that Mexican art,
Yeah.
you know,
The
like the
ama-
embroidered and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Amatis, the amatis.
What's that?
The amatis
Yeah.
is the
Yes.
patterns on paper.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The flowers are not realistic, though. She could paint realistic flowers if she wanted to.
Oh, she could, absolutely.
They're cartoonish.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, we all know her history, her story, the car accident, Diego Rivera. She had a tragic life. Is this the only one we have of her?
Yes.
Okay.
She also cross-dressed too.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she did. That was one of the themes in the artwork, within surrealist, women's surrealist work. I'm just trying to think. In Frida Kahlo's work, she did a lot of self-portraits based on what she went through as an artist, based on her struggles. And she would often do self-portraits to explore the psyche, to explore the sense of self, to explore, excuse me, where she is in terms of her life, in terms of her identity. And I think through her artwork, excuse me, I think through her artwork, her struggles were easier for her to deal with. I think as we all deal with struggles. And I think artwork is such a cathartic process to get through those things. I don't have a lot more to say, but I do want to end off with feminist artists often embraced alternative materials that were connected to the genders I talked about, and how I talked about how they were they were rebellious, there's no question about it, they were rebellious. And I think I want to say how much we owe to the female artists, to the women artists. And there are 5 real themes or things that we see aesthetically in surrealist work. And that's juxtaposition, scale, repetition, metamorphosis, and impossible actions. A lot of the women, whether it be in fiber, whether it be in painting, sculpture, because they did everything, whether it's performance art, whether it is photography, they often would challenge the norms, the system. They would challenge the role that they have as women, as I talked about over and over and over again. And I think that because of them, we have such great performance artists today. We have lots of great photographers. I'm trying to think of some photographers that are surrealist photographers.
Cindy Sherman?
Cindy Sherman, she's a great one. You guys know Cindy Sherman's work?
Yes.
It would have been good. I didn't think about putting contemporaries.
Yeah.
That would have been good. I was focused on more of the history.
You said somebody?
Tina Lowe. What puts me to shame was, as I heard the lecture, was that I'm more versed in the male psychologists than I am of the females. I promise I'm going to catch up on that. But a lot of that movement at that period of time had to do with Freud's psychoanalysis, and whether we believe in him or not, or what he taught, actually the studies will say that he made people more crazy, not make them better. And Carl Jung's symbolism, which is what influenced me a lot more, Carl Jung, than Freud. Freud, I thought he had a problem with his mother. That he didn't take care of. So a lot of my artwork has to do with that mixture, as she explained about the psychological, but a lot of dream work. And you'll see it kind of faded often in layers, because it does have to do a lot with that part of surrealism that has to do with the unconscious and the dream work, although it's not so evident. So in the piece that I enter here, I think in there I was also showing my frustration with all the stuff that we hear all the time. I am delving a little bit more into nature and the connection of human with nature. To not to go too deep into psychology, okay? One of the theories that I like a lot more has to do with what's called the other. Our relationship to anything that's outside of us and inside. And so you see in my approach to nature and what's happening in the environment has to do with our relationship with ourselves and with the other. So whatever is the way we treat the other is the way we actually treat ourselves. And so, not to go into that too much. So this one is my own frustration with, I put the headpiece there because we get so much information all the time. We're bombarded. And then it gets to a point that we just don't, we don't want to deal with it anymore. That's human nature. We just get too much and we can't sort it out. So that's the headpiece. And it has to do with the environment. That's why I put the fish in there, the blue water, what we're doing to every part of nature. But it's also my desire sometimes just to escape it all. I can't handle it. It just seems that, just nothing changes. We really don't act fast enough to do anything about the environment. And I'm also talking about when I talk about the environment and the information, I'm not only talking about nature, but all the stuff that we hear. I got 5 grandkids, okay? The youngest are 7, the oldest are 10. And this is all day long, if I let them. And they love YouTube. And they're hearing all this baloney in YouTube. And I said, Do you believe that? Do you understand that that doesn't exist that way? So it's everything that we hear constantly. So this piece is more about my desire to escape, to fly away. I can't. It ties me down. But it's my desire to just get away from it all and not hear anything else. Unfortunately, we can, especially now with our environment, with the political environment we're in, it's impossible. So this is a recent show that I had, a solo show. Carola was my curator. And so in this piece, I'm dealing with dreams. And the idea of it was what we're leaving behind to the next generation. Obviously, you know, I'm very concerned about my grandkids. my sons are lost, so it's just important. Maybe I can do something with the grandkids. And so the idea was, the concept behind this piece was, if we don't act quickly, the only way we can see nature or experience nature will be in dreams. The way the kids will understand nature may be a faraway memory of what it was. Of course, if we destroy nature, we're gone too. But it's trying to communicate that concept of acting now. We don't have the time. So this is a close-up of it, of that one piece, and I put that one because I like, in all my work, this layering effect. I worked in watercolors for many years, so layering effects are very important for me. That brought that back from watercolor, and colors are very important. And so this is sort of, if you look at her head, there's just clouds and dreams and all that. That's a close-up of one of the pieces. And because I capped at waters, I use my grandkids a lot. The baby says so. So this is the other series that I had in this show. It was one wall full of this 9x9 pieces. This one is I want to see. And I'm trying to communicate that, you know, what children would want to see if we preserve it. And again, all the layers. I spent many years in watercolor, and then I went to acrylics and more abstract pieces. I love, you know, colors and lines and all that. Lines are extremely important. But patterns are very important in my work. But as I begin to get more familiar with fiber art, and FAMA, thanks to FAMA, an artist that I admire, I come back to my roots. My mother, when she came to this country, had to sew. There was no other job. And sometimes I would help her with some of what she was doing. Then I decided I was going to be a fashion designer. And that was my first degree, because I love clothes and fabrics and all that. Maybe some of you remember going to downtown Miami, which you probably did, and go into one of those stores that would be on top or full of fabrics and tons of old stuff there. Oh, I loved it. I'd get lost in the fabric. So that's why I'm involved with fiber art, because I love that feel, the texture. I got away from watercolor a lot because it's so flat. I like texture. I like to be able to feel, touch. And so what I'm doing is trying to dye my own fabric organically, which is very frustrating. I'm working on a project now, and I have this beautiful brown. I can't get it again. I got paint really pretty, but so that's what this is. That also I like, because I like the layer. I use some of this acetate transfer. Remember the old acetate? Some of the school teachers remember that. And because I like that difference in the feel of it and the texture. I love, my grandmother knitted all the time, so sometimes I like to knit, I like to sew by hand, sometimes machine. I got away from sewing from machine for a while, so when I went back, I had to call my sister. How do you thread the machine? It's been a long time. My sister, by the way, is a doctor who is in Boulder now. It's in our blood. She couldn't get away from it. So this one is also my granddaughter. transfer on cloth, but I also like it on paper. I love paper. I love the feel of rice paper, and that's what that is. I also like to do a lot of writing. It's always been part of me. I have journals and journals and journals. And then when I retired from my practice, I had a lot of paper that I shredded a lot of it, which I make my own paper sometimes. And then some of it, like workshops that I went to, that I'll print on that as well. I'm trying to do my part if I can to recycle, but also it's fun. So that's what this piece. This is part of that I want to, this one's I want to sense. So it went, I want to see, I want to sense, and I've got that one to touch. I think so. So again, this is another piece that this one was different. I dyed it with acrylic, fluid acrylic paint. The bottom part, well, you can see for yourself. I dyed it by hand, and I like the scribbles and the lines and the texture. So there are collages, but you can see the surreal influence. I really enjoy listening to that lecture because it puts things in perspective with my work as well. Thank you. Okay, so this is another one that I did recently. It had to do with immigration. So with this piece, I wanted to use some of the stuff that is symbolic of my roots. Palm trees, the royal palms are very symbolic of Cuba. They're here as well. So it's a part of my roots. So I used that. And what it was is when I left Cuba a little while back, I'm maybe dating myself, maybe she understands. Brenda came later, so she doesn't understand this part. But those of us that came very early, we could not write to our family in Cuba because they would read every letter. I came, I was 8 years old, I didn't write to my grandparents, but all my family got left behind. So there was a very long period of time where there was very little communication. And even when they wrote to us, they couldn't put a lot in there because it was read and it could get them in trouble. So the communication there was very sparse. I can't, even when I visited Cuba, I couldn't relate too well. Like I didn't grow up with my cousin, I didn't grow up with my family. So this was about writing those letters that I never wrote. And that's what you see all cut up and scribbled in those pieces. As I was working on it, somebody said to me, they look like boats.
That's really fun.
Yeah.
And I thought that the boats came more full in the beginning, and then it's, as people were making it all the way across. That was the symbolism.
Yeah, and at first, you can see in the slide there, a picture of me when I came from Cuba. Down here is my grandmother, because my grandmother and grandfather came through the Mariel Bullet. So there's that symbolism of reconnecting with them. Now I'm an adult, I'm about to have a child. It's a little different than a kid communicating with a family member, but that's what that piece is about.
Thank you all for coming this crazy rain. Thank you, FAMA. Thank you, Carol. Pinecrest Gardens host us.
Do you want to do your stuff?
Do you want to pass it?
Okay, perfect. So my work is inspired by a very important surrealistic artist called Remedios Varo. She's a Spanish-Mexican artist from the second part of the surrealistic movement. She was born in 1918, and her work became mature, I think, in the 30s and 40s, not in the first part of the movement. So she always inspired me, and she, like Shelley presented so well, she utilizes very different materials as a surface. She works in this work called Planta. She utilized cardboard, oil painting, and golden leaf to represent this crazy, imaginary, oniric writings, she made this painting imagining a woman working with alchemy. So alchemy is like experimenting and dreamlike experiences to make a plant that creates its own movement. Now this plant is autonomous, has its own voices and own like free will. So I was totally inspired by her work because I work with botanical elements and I research botanical pigments, historical botanical pigments such as the Brazil wood and mangrove pigments, two pigments that are connected to my two homelands. Brazil wood is a tree from Brazil that produces red pigment, and mangrove is a plant from Miami, from the South Florida, and also from the coastline of Brazil. So these two pigments connect me to my two homelands. So the piece on the right side is my piece. It's a collage made of, the background is Brazil wood, the red part, and the green and yellow parts, the plant parts, are mangrove pigment and dyes. And the stitches are made with threads dyed with mangrove as well. And I made like a fragmented work, like reconstructing the planta from Remédios Vale. And the name of the piece is a funny name, Replanta. In Portuguese it's the same as Spanish, like rebuilding, reconnecting to this rebel, feminist already intention that Remédios Vale had at the time. So this is my interpretation, and I want to talk about a little bit more. These are the details of the piece. The piece is there on the right, on the left side, on the left wall. And I want to talk a little bit about my process and my research. This is my research about on the Brazil wood pigment. It's a tree that named my country, Brazil. When the Portuguese arrived in Brazil, in the coastline of Brazil, and they discovered the land, they found many trees that could produce a red dye that in the 16th century was super rare in Europe. And the red dye was very, very valuable. So they began to extract the tree, to decimate the tree. They extracted. Nowadays the tree is almost extinct because of this harvesting for 300 years of destruction of the tree to produce the red dye. So Brazil is the only country in the world that is named after a tree and after a dye. So after knowing this, oh my God, I was so interested on researching more and knowing more about this. And also, a good question would be, how do you extract your dye if it's a plant almost extinct? So I extract through trimming of the branches very sustainably, and also from another plant called sapwood that is found in India. And it was also known by the Portuguese because Vasco da Gama already navigated to India and knew the plant. And nowadays they research that it produces the same chemical compound, the Brazilian. So it's an identical substance. So
Identical red.
identical red, yes, identical red. So I work with both plants and with all my care. I take a lot of care, and I only work with certificate sources. And
Is that the red that you're talking about? Is that the red?
the Brazil wood is a big tree. Is this tree, and the sapwood, the Indian one, is like a bush, a small bush. it's not extinct, it's not endangered. And it's very easy to...
And the tone, I mean the artwork with the paintbrush.
Oh, yeah.
Is that the red?
Yes.
Oh, it's
This
like
is the red.
a fuchsia pink type of red?
Yeah. This is the scale. You can take a look. You can pass. This is on paper. And I made it on fabric as well. So you can see the
It's interesting because that looks like the Poinciana tree.
Yes.
And then all of these.
Yes,
this is
it
like
looks
the
so.
same.
So the interesting thing is that researching about the pigments, the dye, I researched ancient recipes from the medieval times, and it's all in books, in Italian books and Portuguese and Dutch recipes from the medieval time, like 16th, 15th and 16th centuries, that if you mix with an acid substance, you get a yellow. If you mix with an alkaline substance, you get a purple. So I played with the palette. And I didn't invent this. I researched on very, very old recipes from the 16th century, and now my work is based, the Brazil wood line of work is based on this, this research.
So what do? You need the branch in water or something?
No, I get the powder of the branch and then I mix with vinegar. There's a recipe already, very, very structured. And I put on the fire with vinegar, and then I reduce, and you have to wait 1 day. There's a long process. And then I mix with mordants.
It's like alchemy.
Exactly, yeah. And when I read about the invention of Remedios Varo for her piece, I felt even more connected to her work, because it's not only the plant and the aspects of her work, but also the intention. The intention.
I actually thought that her piece looked more, it reminded me of like neurons and the structure of the brain and you know, more like to me it spoke more of the intelligence behind, you know, the kind of the sharing of knowledge throughout time and the brain and, you know, that transfer of knowledge.
Yeah, she was very connected to psychoanalysis too.
It's interesting you
all
say
this.
that, because the nerves of the brain, the synaptic and the roots of the trees are like there's knowledge.
It's the same structure. It's the same visual structure.
Exactly. Is just out of curiosity, is that like, can you ingest those dyes or is that
It's not, you won't die if you ingest. Yes, that's okay. But
I work in food, so
it's not like a cochineal that you can put on food, because cochineal is a dye, it's a natural dye that came from insects that you can put on food, not Brazil wood. Not that I know. I was incredible.
That would be interesting to research.
you know, and there's a big movement around non-toxic, you know, things to use on your body and the beauty and all of that. And just that to me reminded me of all the research that's being done around makeup and you know,
Because cochineal is very much used as a for makeup and for dyeing foods, but I never heard about Brazil wood.
stick with me, I'll ask you all sorts of questions.
So the next pigment I'll talk about is the mangrove pigment and dye. There's no literature about mangrove dyes and mangrove dyes extracted from leaves. So I use my experience, my intuition to produce a mangrove dye from the leaves. So I was completely intuitive, and I experimented a lot, and I came into a palette, but
before I will talk a little bit about the plant. It's so interesting because it's a plant that lives in between the salt water and the sweet water. It's a very resilient plant. It protects the coastline from erosion. It's a very important plant to it's like little creatures and fishes and crabs. And it's like a big style. It's like a small, protected environment. And so